Well, there is a terrific energy in here today. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank you. I think you can't not have a great energy when you think about the fact that there's almost 300 families here in our city who wouldn't have been able to have Thanksgiving otherwise, who will because of what you've just done. So I just want to say thank you. That is absolutely amazing. It is Thanksgiving week, and I'd like to begin by reading to you from the book of Deuteronomy. Oh. The clicker. It looked so easy when Roche was using it. We'll see if I can do this. All right. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Therefore keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Good or bad, I think that Thanksgiving is probably the holiday that is filled with the most memories. Is that right? Good food, good football, good parades when I was a kid, kind of psychedelic children's movies. I don't know if you experienced it seemed like every Thanksgiving afternoon it was March of the Wooden Soldiers and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Pushing yourself away from the table after eating so much that the only comfortable place to go and lie down is on a wooden floor. Promising yourself that you will not eat for another 3 weeks until about 10 o'clock that night when you find yourself in the dark kitchen leaning on the refrigerator door, this light emanating out of the fridge, trying to find the mayonnaise and the bread for your first leftover turkey sandwich. And then, of course, all of the family dysfunctionality in all of its glory on full display. You know, I don't think that my mom could ever get her and her siblings, we could never get the three of them in the same room together unless it was a funeral or Thanksgiving. I've told you a little bit before about my Jimmy Buffett clone, Uncle Michael, our wild and crazy motorcycle riding mafia man dating Susan, Aunt Susan. One time, one year, Uncle Michael was sailing up from the Bahamas to have dinner with us at our beach house in Cape May, New Jersey. And he had arrived the night before, but he still managed to come to our dinner 4 hours late. He had been at the Marina bar self-medicating and preparing himself for having to be with us, his family. And he brought with him in tow this very interesting man, an ex-Vietnam vet. The only problem is this guy was a little bit odd. He kind of clinged to me from the moment he walked through the door. I think I was 10 years old at the time. But he just constantly was just telling me all of his most horrific, horrible, stomach-turning war stories from Vietnam, and giving me advice on what to do if I was ever in mortal danger, locked in mortal conflict with an enemy. He said, all you have to do is you cup your hands like this and you just pop them in the ears. He said it would rupture their eardrums and they'd be writhing around on the floor in agony. And he kept saying it over and over again. You just pop them in their ears. Pop them in their ears. In fact, the whole night, every time I would see him, even across on the other side of the room, he'd go like this. He'd go. I'll tell you, that was one memorable Thanksgiving. I think there isn't anything that gives us a trip down memory lane like Thanksgiving Day, which kind of makes sense because one of probably the most oft-repeated commandment in the entire Bible is the command to remember. To remember and not to forget. Throughout the scriptures, God tells us this over and over again. There we go. Remember this day in which you came out of Egypt. The strength of the hand of the Lord brought you out. And then in Psalms, I will call to mind the deeds of the Lord. Yea, I will remember thy wonders of old. And again, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not his benefits. From Proverbs, my son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart. Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Do not forget to do good and to share with others. All they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor. Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourself were suffering. And one of everyone's favorites, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. And then, we go by Genesis, even the rainbow itself was created to help us remember. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth. And then, of course, once a month on our communion Sundays, the apex of the entire service is when we stand behind the table and we call to mind that commandment that Jesus gave us. Do this in remembrance of me. So why is it? I mean, this is just touching the tip of the iceberg. It is all over Scripture, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, all the way through is this command over and over again to remember, not to forget. Why do you think God is so anxious for us to get this driven home? Do you think it has anything to do with our oh-so-human tendency to forget just about everything? That often in spectacular fashion, we have this ability to forget the most important things in life. There's a story about three women who are maturing women who are discussing the travails of getting older. And the one says, it happens sometimes. I'll be standing at the refrigerator door, I'll have that jar of mayonnaise in my hand, and I'm not sure if I'm putting it into the refrigerator or taking it out of the refrigerator. And the second one says, oh, I'm so glad you said that. Sometimes I find myself on the landing of our stairs, and I'm not sure if I'm going up or I'm going down. And the third one says, well, I'm glad I'm not there yet. Knock on wood. Oh, somebody's at the door. I'll get it. You all know problems I have with memory. Important things just fly out of my mind at the most inopportune moments. I find myself all the time doing this way too often. My mind's preoccupied with 1,000 other things, and I'll be walking up to the office door at the church or my home, and I have my key clicker in my hand, and I'm pushing it at the door, thinking that somehow it's going to unlock the door. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffering both from amnesia and deja vu all at the same time. I get this nagging suspicion that I've forgotten this before. We forget. It's a part of the miswiring of our bodies, of our human souls. We forget things that are important. We particularly forget things when things start to go well. And this is the whole point of today's scripture. The Israelites were waiting at the banks of the River Jordan after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, about to go across and enter that land that had been promised to them. And God knows what's going to happen. God can see it coming 1,000,000 miles away, that the moment they get over there, the moment that they get a house built and they start to plant their own vineyards and grow their own herds, they're going to start to think that somehow this was their doing, that they were the ones that created this for themselves, that this was not God's blessing, and then that they would forget God. Hosea summed it up so eloquently when he said, when they were fed, they became satisfied. And when they became satisfied, they became proud. And when they became proud, they forgot me. And so when they crossed over into the land of Canaan, the rabbis very quickly started writing this series of prayers to try to help the people remember. They called them the 18 benedictions, and they were these short little prayers, these short little blessings. Benediction, good word, a blessing for everything in life. And these 18 benedictions were supposed to be recited every morning, every afternoon, and every evening before bed. And so they had these little prayers for just about everything. The rabbis would write these prayers for every kind of food, not just for food in general, but a different prayer for figs and a different one for pomegranates and a different one for honey. They had a different prayer for the bread and a different prayer for the wine, as we see Jesus following the liturgy as he goes through the Lord's Supper. They have a special prayer when you see a comet flying through the sky, or another prayer when you see your eyes come across the ocean. Every time that they lit a lamp, they would say a special prayer thanking God for the light. Because what they understood was that all of these blessings were not something that they could bring or create for themselves. They were no more able to create the light that they enjoyed than they'd be able to recreate the human nervous system. And so they saw these simple things as gifts from God. And in fact, those early Israelites, the way that they understood it is if you did not say thank you, if there was not a benediction or a blessing for every little thing that you enjoyed and every little thing that you partook in a sense that was a kind of thievery. That you are stealing God because you are using something that you didn't create, something that you could have never created or deserved. You are using it without giving thanks to the one who provided it. In fact, the Lord's Prayer is Jesus' version of these 18 benedictions that they were all taught about. And so what they found is they started to come into the discipline of thanking God for everything, for every little thing that they enjoyed in life, was that a curious byproduct of this habit of theirs was an incredible sense of gratitude. There is a hard truth that's at play in our universe and in our lives. And that is that true gratitude, true contentment and satisfaction and joy in life doesn't come from more acquisitions, but from more awareness of God's blessing and goodness in our life. Let me say that again, because that is the central theme of this entire sermon, that true, deep down life contentment and satisfaction and joy doesn't come from more acquisitions, but comes from a greater awareness, more awareness of God's blessings and undeserved gifts, even the small gifts that have been given to us in our lives. This is exactly why Abraham Lincoln started Thanksgiving Day in the first place. It was 1863, and Lincoln made this proclamation. I've got the clicker. Here's what he said. We have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious band which preserved us in peace and multiplied and enriched and strengthened us. And we vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we have become too self-sufficient to feel a necessity of redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God who made us. It has seemed to me fit and proper that God should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged, as with one heart and one voice, by the whole American people. Pretty amazing, huh? You want to know what's even more amazing? Is that he wrote those words in 1863. The fall of 1863, when this country was head deep in the middle of the Civil War. One of the most horrific wars people have ever seen. Right after, just a few months after the Battle of Gettysburg, when thousands and thousands of American lives had been lost, the entire nation was divided and confused, and Lincoln said, now is the time that we need to get down on our knees and thank God for all of the blessings in our life. Which leads me to the last point that I want to make, is that this attitude of being grateful, this sort of way of seeing life, of experiencing and living our life, is not dependent on the circumstances in our life at a given moment. Some of you have been through some of the most difficult things this year and in the last couple of years. Losing members of your family, the dearest members of your family. Health diagnoses that have sent you into a tailspin. Relationships that have broken up, jobs that have been lost, houses that have been lost. And I am not one of those who would say that we're supposed to rejoice in the terrible things that happen. I just don't understand that theology. I don't get it. I believe that there are things that happen that God does not intend. There is accidents, there is disease, and we do things to one another that God does not intend and God does not want to see happen, and God does not expect us to give thanks for the terrible storms that come and go in our lives. But if we want to live as content, satisfied, joyful people, then what we need to remember is that there are always beautiful things around us. Incredible gifts that God surrounds us with, small things that we so easily take for granted. And that when we make a habit out of thanking God for those small things, it changes something deep inside of us. It helps us, even when we're going through the tough times, to live a content and joyful life instead of one of fear and disappointment and entitlement. I want to close this sermon by reading to you the story of a young woman. Her name is Taylor. And she's a member at one of our Presbyterian churches in Atlanta. When Taylor was a young girl, her brother Lane passed away. And then just less than a year later, when she was 6 years old, her mother unexpectedly died just a few days before Christmas. If there was ever anyone who could give up and live a life of disappointment and fear, it would have been Taylor, but she made a different choice. I think shows us that we all can make a choice. In order to keep her mother close, she would write a letter to her mother once every year, just around this time of year, when it was Thanksgiving and close to the anniversary of her mom's death. And I want to read to you the letter that she wrote when she was a senior in high school. Listen to this. Mom, wow. If you only knew how much I miss you. I miss everything about you. It has been so hard growing up and you not being here. I would give anything for you to walk in the door just so I could hug you one more time. The day you left the house to go to the hospital, you gave me the biggest hug and told me how much you loved me. Every day, I wish I could go back to that moment and make it last forever. You know what my favorite thing in the world is now? It's when I hear someone tell me that I look more and more like you every day. In fact, now that I'm getting older, I hear it more and more often. It's my senior year now, and I wish you were here to share it with me. At all the basketball games, I see all the girls' moms there, and it makes me think of you because I know how much you love to watch Lane and me play sports. I know there's a reason God wanted you with him so soon. I've had some friends go through some really hard times with the loss of loved ones. You know who they call? Me. That may be the reason. It's so hard without you here, but I'm trying my best to be strong for you. I love you so much, Mom. Even though you didn't watch me grow up and we didn't get to have all those mother-daughter fights, I just want you to know that I'm doing good and I'm thinking about you every day. I love you forever. And then a year later, she wrote this. Mom, I'm in college now, living on my own. Well, kind of. I have a roommate. Her name is Rebecca. She's awesome. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing good and doing what I've always wanted to do, play college ball. I still miss you. Every day, Mom. Keep looking out for me. I love you today more than ever, and I am so grateful that you are still a part of my life, even though we can't see each other. And I know you are still watching over me. I love you. Taylor. It is a matter of perspective, isn't it? Not necessarily the circumstances. What is it that you're grateful for this Thanksgiving week? And don't forget, whatever you do, don't forget to remember. Amen.